to widespread share. Kia ora, nā EVScope, haurapa, arangi iti o Aotearoa, the EVScope asteroid hunters of New Zealand. And my apologies for my probably very foul Maori pronunciation there. Well, that's rather appropriate just after we've celebrated Matariki, which is a new astronomy-based public holiday in New Zealand. I'm just going to introduce some of the activities that some EVScope owners in New Zealand have just recently started getting up to. You've just gone from probably one of the most experienced occultation experts in the world to one of the most recent ones. So this will be a very, very big change of pace. Most of you probably have some familiarity of the EVScope. I won't go into its technical details. It is a small telescope with a colour camera on it, a lot smaller than most of you probably use for your observations. I bought an EVScope earlier this year. I started doing some astronomy last year, got myself a telescope with a camera, ended up with a few telescopes with a couple of cameras, and I sort of whittled it down, and then I decided to give the EVScope a go and see what that could offer. I joined the EVScope Facebook group in New Zealand. When I joined it, it had about 11 members in it. Some of you probably know Gareth Davies. He's a very experienced outreach astronomer with the Auckland Astronomical Society and the Royal Astronomical Society in New Zealand. He set up the group and has been trying to encourage people to use the EVScope throughout the country. So I joined in March 2022, and on the 4th of April, I reached out to Gareth and said, hey, there's this occultation going over. I'd like to give it a crack. I'd tried a few other citizen science observations and just wanted to see what this occultation dark was about. So naively, I asked Gareth to participate with a bit of arm twisting. Managed to get him along. So that event was a occultation of Tuchkova. I was very naive. If you look at the lines there, that is the central line going through Auckland, and then one standard deviation line going through the lower North Island. The northern line is actually almost off the screen here. The central predicted path was about 860 kilometres for an asteroid that had a diameter of roughly 19 or 20 kilometres. Initially, I didn't have a clue. When I did realise how unlikely it was that we were going to get this occultation, we just decided to go for it anyway. Given it was so wide, there was really no point in travelling because it could be basically anywhere. So Gareth observed from home, and I observed from a site about 15 kilometres south. So this was actually Gareth's first citizen science observation. This was the first time I tried an asteroid occultation observation and done a few other observations using the EVScope. And if you have a look there, these are the light years that get produced by Unistellar and put up on their Slack channel. I'm not sure if that's going to play again, but we can give it a go. So we got really, really, really lucky on this one. We had no right to catch this occultation at all, given how widespread it was and how inexperienced we were. But it was a big thrill, and we reported the result through to Unistellar, and it actually got quite a lot of attention. It was actually the first observation for occultations for New Zealand. There were some other observers, John Pickering in the South Island and a couple of others that have been doing other types of observations, but none had actually attempted an occultation event before. So we were quite encouraged by this. But we weren't naive anymore. So Unistellar puts on the website each month a list of occultation events that they're interested in for the various regions. And we just took a look at the next one and thought, here's Lindelof coming through. We're going to need more than 2 observers if we're going to have a chance of actually getting this one. So we actually reached out, Unistellar reached out to their local network. Let's see if I can find their network map. Because they have a network of registered EVScope owners across the world. As you can see, there's not many in New Zealand. There are only about a dozen registered EVScope users in New Zealand. So they reached out to try and get them to join the Facebook page or participate in the campaign. So as a result, we actually got 8 new EVScope owners on there and some people who were interested in attempting in the occultation observation. For all of them, it was their first occultation observation. For most of them, it was their first attempt at a citizen science observation with the EVScope. So we had a workshop over Zoom, and we went through the process of what was required and provided a few resources. So in the end, we managed to get 6 observers for this one, which, looking at Dave's stats of multi-chord observations or whatever, this doesn't actually look like a bad campaign for such short notice. So we spread them out. We spread out the observers across the central path. I was the only, we had a couple of people travel. I travelled to the most northern site from Auckland, about an hour's drive. It's on the banks of the Waikato River, waiting for the fog to roll in, which it did actually during the observation. And we lost 1 observer to cloud for that. So we actually managed to get 5 out of 6 observations done. And we got 1 success, which was this one down here, quite far from the central path. So if any of us had just tried it, you know, the opportunistic observation of the one hoping it was going to go over our heads at home, we would have missed out completely. So this is the base result for the Lindelof observation. There's just 2 that have been presented there. Gareth Davies was the next nearest one, so got a confirmed negative, and here we go. A little link out for Wayne with his first asteroid occultation observation and his first successful one. So up until last week, he had 100% success rate. But that's definitely not going to last. So Unistellar takes those results. They have a lead astronomer for each of their citizen science programs, and they have a team behind them. They get involved with the SETI Institute, with Lucy and other programs, which I don't know a lot about, but they take the results. They upload the basic video within usually a couple of days of the occultation event, once it's been uploaded from the scope. And then once they do the analysis, then they can provide more detailed light curve renderings. And in this case, they were actually able to make some progress on the shape model for this asteroid, because we managed to get 2 chords through Tuchkova, which was quite a fortunate observation to be able to do. The result of this actually came through pretty quick. So, sorry, I'll just try to hide this part of the screen. I'm not sure how to unpin it, sorry. So they used the result to refine the path of Tuchkova. So the next occultation that they put up for observation was actually last night, Friday, over North America. So for this one, the path had been refined down to being about 50 kilometres across, which for a 20-kilometre wide asteroid actually gives them a pretty good shot at it. I'm not sure how many people went for that. There wasn't any buzz or any sort of organised campaign going through the Unistellar State Channel, so I'm not sure how many people participated in that one. 1 negative result's been put up so far, and then the results will be pending for that one. So it's quite exciting to see the within a couple of months, the observations that we'd managed to do being used to refine the next one, and then hopefully get more information so we can get multi-chord observations of that asteroid. The Lindelof was a single chord observation, so they weren't able to make much progress on the shape model with that, and we did have a confirmed negative outside the boundaries. That does put some constraints on that. Again, you can see the light curve that gets produced for that. So we're not stopping there. Sorry, there's a bit of background noise there. Thank you. So we're not stopping there. We've got a core group of about 6 to 8 observers that seem to have gotten hooked on asteroid observations. So we're now planning our future observations. On last Thursday, there was another unistellar occultation for asteroid Pius. Excuse my pronunciation there. So for that one, we got quite well organised. We managed to get 6 observers confirmed, and then had more people go to remote locations. The first one we did was 6th, was centred through Hamilton. We were quite quite a lot of the observers were based, so most managed to observe from home. But for this observation, we had to have 3 people travel remotely, which, as you all know, there's a big difference between observing from home and observing remotely, especially when it's the first time that you've tried to do it. So we actually got 6 successful observations. Gareth had a very difficult time. It was completely clouded over in Auckland. It was basically like 90% cloud cover. One of the benefits of the EVScope is it uses field detection for a single image. So he basically pointed the scope in the general direction of where it needed to go. And then fortunately, with about a minute to spare, managed to get a field detection and slew to the asteroid, slew to the star, and actually complete the observation. So it was very, very marginal conditions for Gareth, but he managed to pull that one off. So far we've got 4 confirmed negatives, and there's still 2 more to upload, which is these red stars. So at this stage we're kind of wondering, where is that asteroid hiding? Hopefully one of those 2 will actually be a positive observation, but we'll probably know within the next day or 2. So now that we've got a whole bunch of people that seem to have been bitten by the asteroid bug, we're actually planning to do more observations. This is the list of occultation events that have been put up by Unistellar that go over New Zealand, and about 2/3 of those are actually going over near Auckland or Hamilton. So this core group of people will have a chance of doing some more team observations. So we're planning this through our EVScope Facebook group at the moment, and we should be able to get multiple observers out to probably 3 or 4 of these occultation events that are in the Upper North Island. There is a campaign that Unistellar is doing across the month of July, so starting in June into July, and I think into August, for Patroclus and Miniotis, and that's part of the Lucy program. So that's a worldwide observation. So there's observation opportunities for most parts of the globe for that binary asteroid. That will be seriously pushing the limits of the EVScope. I've been told by their lead astronomer there that most of the occultation events they put are down to about magnitude 11.5. It's about as dim as they tend to go. This one's down at about magnitude 15. So it's going to require a dark sky sight. Gareth's site was actually Bortle 6 for his observation in Auckland. So it's going to be a much more challenging observation than we've had before, and we're going to have to pay a lot more attention to collimation and focus and cool down and all those kinds of things. So we'll pay a bit more attention to that on this one, and we'll see what we can do, whether or not that is actually a viable observation or not. So that just gives you an idea of where we're at. It's all very recent. It's only really kicked off in the last couple of months, and by chance or good fortune, we've managed to get a bit of momentum going, and hopefully we can get some more EVScope owners to participate in the observations. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for that, Michael. It's great to see a bit of action up the north end of the North Island. It's been a while since we've had any observations through our network in that part of the country, so good to see some enthusiasm. I think there's one question in the chat. Can unistellar telescopes be used in the pre-point mode? Just maybe to interpret that a little bit, the scope is tracking the field at the time of observation?
Yeah, it tracks. Once you set it up, it detects the field wherever it is, and then it starts tracking. And then if you want to point somewhere else, it does I suppose, a dead reckoning slew to where it thinks it is, because it doesn't account for the amount being level. And then it detects again and then moves through. So basically star hops by field detecting. So if you've got your mount perfectly level, which is almost certainly never going to happen, then if you slow, you'd be exactly where you need to be. But usually it'll slow, field detect, and then move a little bit to find where it is. So what you can do is you can field detect, aim it at a star, it'll keep tracking that star. And then when you're ready to trigger an observation, then you can do that. These observations are triggered through a science mode. The EVScope itself, when you use it, you either take a single exposure, or you use the enhanced vision, which sets up a live stack of 4-second exposures at 25 dB gain, and you've got no control over that whatsoever. All you can do is change the screen brightness and contrast to alter the image a little bit. When you do the science mode observations, that's when the gain and the exposure time is specified, and then records a series of images on that schedule for the time that is specified. So it's not obviously not as flexible as being able to do exactly what you want with your own camera, with your own computer, with your own acquisition software, storing the images exactly how you want them. So this is part of the standardization that Unistellar does. So I'll just show you briefly, I might be getting a bit off topic here. Basically, this is their prediction page. It's a worldwide prediction page for wherever people are located. And then to do an observation, you just click on the link there. And if you do it from your phone, it opens up your app, puts all the information for the position, for the exposure, the gain into the Unistellar app. You press go to select where you need to go. You press launch, and it does all the rest. So they try to make it quite a smooth process. I mean, at the end, the data gets uploaded to the Unistellar cloud databases, and then there's a semi-manual process there to trigger the pipeline for that data processing to be done.
Michael, if you were going to share the website, we're still seeing your PowerPoint slide.
Oh, sorry. I'll see what I can do. Sorry about that, bit of operator error. Yeah, so that's the website there. So they put out a calendar of the events that they have an interest in for the month, and then people get an opportunity to choose the ones that they think they can go for. Once you press that link, it will populate the data into the app, so you can do the observation.
Okay. Can I jump in and make a couple of comments and probably answer a couple of the questions that have been raised on the chat group? I've had some involvement with Unistellar for the last 12 months, and people like Eric Frapper in Europe's had a fair bit of dealing with them as they were setting up their system. I think the position is that the EVScope is a very interesting, exciting development. It's got a lot of interesting features. With the occultation stuff, it has good potential, but they're in the process of improving things, if I can put it that way. Their early observations, the quality, there were serious problems with their quality. That's been drastically improved. Currently, they've employed a programmer, and they're redoing their whole reduction methodology to get a proper assessment of the light curve and the appropriate uncertainties. What they've been doing in the past has been not up to scratch. In terms of the processing, it is all through Unistellar. So the observer observes and forwards off, and the observer doesn't get involved. The arrangements we have is that ultimately they'll all come through our system. And I've got code there when the EVScope results come through, where they are extra results for observations we already have, they get included with those, or if it's observations which are unique, then they get added. And it's from that process that ultimately any astrometry from it gets passed on into the system. One of the questions in the chat group is, what is the time source? My understanding is the time source is what you get off the mobile phone when you set it up. And if you're in a location where you've got very good phone type time systems, then potentially you've got a highly accurate time base. But if you're in an area where that's not the case, then your time base is a problem. And some of the early observations I saw, they clearly had time-based issues. In that sense, for our occultation observations, the issue of the time base is probably going to be an issue of ongoing concern because of the use of the mobile phone. It's effectively an NTP system. And if you're in the right area, no problems. If you're not in the right area, then your time might be unreliable. And that's an issue of concern. But Unistellar are clearly intent on sorting that out. The other thing, Michael, you referred to this event coming up, where you're doing a 15th magnitude thing. With the aperture is 10 centimetres, 12 centimetres?
No, 114 millimetres.
11 centimetre aperture.
Yeah.
11 centimetre aperture, magnitude 15 star. Your exposures are going to be 30 seconds at least, which means you're not going to get any sensible results out of that. If they're pushing you to do a 15th magnitude star with that aperture, I mean, 15th magnitude is a challenge with my 16-inch, 40 centimetre telescope. With an 11 centimetre telescope, I think everybody here would say that is pushing the boundaries in a serious way.
Yep.
However, the EVScope is tapping into a population of potential observers and providing that Unistellar improves their reduction processes so that they are getting proper results out of it. It's going to be a very valuable input into our results. In that sense, it's looking forward to results, but you've got that slide out there with all the known telescopes there. The number of reports we're receiving so far is very low numbers.
Yeah, it is quite low. There's a Slack channel where most of the activity happens, and I think the Australasian, I'll take a look, sorry. Yeah, so there's a Slack channel where results get posted, and there's regional specific ones. So there's 54 members on the Oceania one, 194 members on the North American. So only a small fraction of EVScope owners are active doing citizen science observations, and then a small fraction of those are active doing asteroid occultations.
Yes, from memory, there's one in Japan.
Sorry?
And the main results are somebody in Japan, and there's about 3 or 4 in Europe, and might be one in the US, 1 or 2 in the US have reported results. But it's an interesting development, and we encourage people to do it because it's valid observations.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of thinking about the problem you're talking about the number of observations that are coming through and the quality of the observations and the amount of work that it takes to do them. You know, this I think represents an opportunity with the EVScope to make it much more accessible. We had one of our observers for the Lindelof observation. That night was the first time they'd ever used an EVScope, and they managed to successfully follow the procedure and get data. The learning curve to actually do a usable observation is very, very low. And then it becomes a matter of what's the best way to use these observations to actually advance the science. And I don't have the answer for that, but things like that Tuchkova observation that we managed to fluke. When you've got a very uncertain position, the most valuable thing possibly is managing to refine the position. And for that, a bunch of scopes doing relatively low quality observations could be quite valuable. I think it's just going to be down to now, what's the best way to use these scopes? What's the best way to make use of the data for them?
And on all of that, the issue is the results need to get feeded into our systems, because that's where we've got the global system set up. And yeah, it's all the astrometry is going to come through us.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. I mean, yes, they're quite small numbers of observers, but as you've seen from our own slides today, we're a pretty small number too.
Yep.
So I think you know, there's an opportunity there for a very significant contribution. And if there's anything that you feel you could get from ourselves, from TTOA, from myself, or any of the people here to support promoting that, particularly up that Auckland Hamilton corridor, that's you know, please reach out, because that's a great resource there that you've got.
Yeah, we're just trying to figure out, what do we do, how do we do it, and how can we best work with other people to make the most of the capabilities that we have, and where we can actually contribute to other programs. Yeah, it's an interesting one. We'll see how many more we get. This type of telescope will become increasingly common, and hopefully the price will go lower, so there'll be more opportunities for that. There is actually a new one. There's a couple of new ones. Stelina's put out the Vespera, which is that's a 200mm focal length scope, quite a small one. And there's a new scope called the Dwarf 2, which is a 24mm lens, 100mm. And these are fully computerized, driven from your cell phone. And the Dwarf 2 is retailing for about $400 US. So, the technology's getting there, they're becoming more integrated, more and more of these devices are becoming, will be coming on stream. So it'll be very interesting to see where astronomy is, in 5 or 10 years' time. You probably won't be doing this kind of thing off your smartphone as the actual capture device for an occultation, but it'd be great if you could just imagine something like the EVScope costs, say, $1,000 US. How many more people would you have? How many more potential observers would you have to be able to actually properly crowdsource these types of observations? And the ability for an astronomer to just say, I need observations of this, put it out through a system, and then hundreds or thousands of scopes around the world, either people turn them on themselves or they turn on and they just start observing. That's the kind of future that we're looking at with this type of technology.
That was actually one of the questions in the chat was, can you operate this thing genuinely remotely, as in not standing just beside it?
Not the EVScope. The way that's set up, it does a local Wi-Fi connection to your phone. Your phone and your device then can use a 4G or 5G connection. So if you can remotely control your phone or tablet through 4G, then potentially you could remotely control it with the functions that are available through the app. But it doesn't have autofocus. It doesn't have automatic collimation. You have to put the dust cap on and off to get the focus on these kinds of things. So there'd be a limited number of operations that you'd be able to do with that. You couldn't take a dark frame or something like that. The EVScope, as far as I know, it doesn't have an API interface, so it's not easy to integrate with other apps, or at least it doesn't have a public one. And it also, I don't think it uses EVScom drivers or those kinds of things, which would I think make it quite difficult to get it to work with other phone apps or something like that. The Dwarf 2 telescopes, which has been developed, I believe they are making use of EVScom and other open source drivers. So that might make it possible to actually remote control it by things other than the app. But one of the complaints that we do get from EVScope owners, particularly those doing exotransits where, you've got 3, 4, 5 hour observations, is the observations need to be re-triggered about every 30 to 40 minutes. So you have to be awake every 30 to 40 minutes to make sure it's pointed in the right place, trigger the next observation, and off you go. Whereas if you've got your own rig, you can set it up with, just to track through the night and do its meridian and flip and everything you need to do. So it doesn't have that level of automation. Yeah. So definitely some limitations there, and definitely room for improvement.
Very good. I'm just conscious the time's getting away. So thank you for that, Michael. That's really appreciated, and I will be in touch.
Thank you.
To follow up and see how we can help.